Good afternoon and good morning, good evening to all attendees who have joined the webinar. Welcome. We will start in a minute while waiting for more colleagues to join us. While we're waiting, perhaps you would like to put in the chat um, where you're from, your name, organizations where you're from, and which country are you based, so that we have a sense of who's in the room. Let's wait for another minute. Welcome from Vietnam, from Uruguay, from Kenya, from Indonesia. Good to see someone from Indonesia. I myself is from Indonesia as well. Um, from South Africa, Belgium, Nepal, Mexico, Myanmar, Niger, Brazil, Pakistan, Netherlands. There's so many of you around the world, from Canada, Namibia, Cambodia, the UK, Nepal as well, Botswana, Philippines. Well, very glad to see all of you here today. Thank you so much for joining us in this session of Farm Knowledge Series on policy gaps, opportunities to reduce highly hazardous pesticides. My name is Nadia. I'm from the GEF FARM Global Project. And warm welcome to all of you. Today we will discuss the gaps in pesticides regulatory frameworks and also practical approaches to addressing them together with national experts from three countries, Sri Lanka, India, and Botswana, as well as global experts from Switzerland as well as UK. Um, Very important note that I will have to say is that this is only looking at small group of examples, and we will have more conversations on this in the future, featuring more expert organizations, more countries to be engaged. So please make sure that you are part of the farm community, and we will be able to share all information of future sessions with you. So I will ask my colleague Melanie if you could put the slides, Melanie. Can you share your screen, Melanie? Thank you very much. So if you go to the next slides with farm, the next slide, Melanie. Thank you very much. So this session is part of a larger knowledge initiatives of the GEF funded farm program. Led by UNEP, FARM is a multi-country, multi-stakeholder initiatives, and it has a goal to support the reduction and sound management of harmful pesticides and agricultural plastics. So two of these elements across agri-food systems through coordinated actions at national, regional, and global level. So we are present at in 7 countries, and it's in our interest also to harmonize and examine various approaches to pesticides reduction across local, national, regional, and global stakeholders, which is why today's conversation is very important. If you go to the next slide, Melanie. Yes, this is the organizations that we are working with, and you will be able to see there two important organizations with whom we co-host this webinar today. It's CABI and PAN UK. So next slide, Melanie, please. So if you can click also one more time. So at Farm, we acknowledge that managing pesticides reduction issues does not depend only on a single aspect. We're looking at the elements of finance, capacity building, and knowledge, and creating enabling policy. So today we focus on the first element, which is the one very important aspect of farm intervention, which is policy. And we particularly will unpack the context and challenges that policymakers face in implementing HHP's reduction strategies, drawing on real-world experiences from different countries around the world. So this includes, discussions around what works, where key policy gaps remain, and what practical steps can we take to support and shape realistic and sustainable pathways away from reliance on HHPs. So if you go to the next slide, Melanie, and without further ado as well, I will now hand it over to Dr. Robert Malek, pesticides risk reduction expert at CABI, who will be our moderator for today and will explain a bit about how we are going to run the session. So over to you, Robert.
Thank you very much, Nadia. Welcome everyone to this Farm Knowledge Series session on policy gaps for the phase out of HHPs. As Nadia said, this is one of the many sessions that will come in the future where we'll have more opportunities to share findings and discuss at length the issues that are imminent to our agricultural sector nowadays. Um, um, if I may ask from the participants, as you've done already, we have seen representation from all across the globe. Many countries, many organizations are represented in today's webinar. Thank you all for joining. Please continue using the chat to discuss or comment with each other and to let us know where you're from. We kindly ask you to use the Q&A button when you want to ask questions to the speakers. We hope that you can all hear us well. If not, please let us know also in the chat that you have problems hearing, if you have any issues with your audio. Next slide, please. So this webinar is currently being recorded. Thanks to GGKP for organizing and hosting this webinar. You'd be able to access all the slides and the recording on the GEF FARM website. There's a session, the Ask the Expert session where speakers today will be able to answer any unanswered questions during this webinar in later stages. So please feel free to register by scanning this QR code and so that you keep track with everything that's going on in the series. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give a brief introduction on to HHPs, to what policies and regulations out there in given countries when one wants to evaluate policies and regulations and their strength in helping or advancing the phase out of HHPs. I'll give a brief overview of that. We'll also run a short poll to understand your views on a certain question. I'll then hand the floor to my colleague Melanie Bateman, Global Lead Synthetic Pesticides in CABI, to walk us through briefly on what needs to be done to strengthen policies to identify and phase out HHPs and support lower risk alternatives. We have a guest speaker today, Dr. Jeevani Marasinghe, the Registrar of Pesticides from the Department of Agriculture in Sri Lanka. A second guest speaker is joining us from Botswana, Dr. Esaiah Tjele, Program Officer Crops, and Dr. Esaiah is in the Secretariat of the Southern African Development Community. And our third guest speaker is Dr. Gagnesh Sharma, Director of the National Center for Organic and Natural Farming of India. Throughout the session today, colleagues from PAN UK, Dr. Sheila Willis and Dr. Alex Stuart, are also going to introduce two other concepts, so to say, the importance of establishing dedicated biopesticide pathways, for example, and the role of subsidies in phasing out or in helping the phase out of HHPs and the adoption of lower risk alternatives. Next slide, please. So now I'm just going to give you a brief outline and introduction about the work that CABI and PAN UK did as part of an initial scoping study of the GEF farm component one, which is policy and enforcement. A brief overview on what HHPs are, what highly hazardous pesticides are, and the criteria used to identify those. In our analysis, in collaboration with the Farm Child projects, we identified certain HHPs that are still registered in some of the projects and other pesticides that were prioritized. So we'll briefly touch on those. And then I'll go through a list of policy gaps and opportunities to strengthen those policies to advance our goals. Next slide, please. Over the past few months, CABI and PAN UK, they performed an initial scoping study as part of the farm program that led to the identification of HHPs in use. We assessed their risks and prioritization in consultation with the child projects. We determined lower risk alternatives to those HHPs and provided a database of those alternatives. We assessed policies that either prevent the registration of new HHPs or cancel or ban the approvals of previously registered ones, and other policies and regulations that relate to biopesticides and lower risk alternatives. As part of our study as well, we identified technical knowledge gaps and capacity building needs in the 7-child projects. Next slide, please. Thank you all for those who already sent out their questions. Many of them are very valuable and timely. Some of those questions actually we're asking, how do we identify HHPs? What are they, and how do we deal with them, and how do we know if a given country has them registered? Well, HHPs, or highly hazardous pesticides, are defined by the International Code of Conduct on Pesticide Management, published by the FAO and WHO, as those that are acknowledged to present particularly high levels of acute or chronic hazards to health or the environment, according to internationally accepted classification systems. Highly hazardous pesticides are also those that cause severe or irreversible harm to human health and the environment under conditions of use in a given country. Next slide, please. So there are 8 criteria that individuals and countries can use to identify highly hazardous pesticides. Those criteria were agreed upon by the WHO and by the World Health Organization and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So the first criteria deals with acute toxicity, and those are based on the WHO recommended classification. Criterion 2, 3, and 4 deal with carcinogenicity, mutagenicity, and reproductive toxicity according to the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals. Criterion 5, which deals with the persistence of certain active ingredients, and that is strictly linked to the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants. So, for example, one of the questions that came in was, are persistent organic pollutants highly hazardous pesticides? Well, clearly they are. If they are classified under Annex A, B, and D of the Stockholm Convention. Now, there are criterion 6 deals with pesticide active ingredients and formulations that are listed in the Rotterdam Convention in its Annex 3. And those have to do with prior informed consent for certain hazardous chemicals in international trade. Criterion 7 deals with pesticides that are listed under the Montreal Protocol, so those that cause depletion in the ozone layer. And criterion 8 are pesticides that cause severe or irreversible harm to human health and the environment. And those are more identified on a local use context basis. Next slide, please. Um, so again, we're talking about the persistent organic pollutants. As part of our study, we found that there um, there are three registered POPs in at least one of the child project countries. For example, we see that chlorpyrifos is still registered in Kenya. In Kenya, it has been banned as an agricultural input, but its uses, but it remains registered, but heavily restricted. So it's only allowed to be used for the management of ants and termites in buildings and construction sites. Um, DDT, for example, was planned to be phased out in India by 2025. It continues to be manufactured for export to Southern Africa to manage human health vectors of common diseases. Um, and yeah, next slide, please. And there were other priority pesticides or priority HHPs that had already been identified and prioritized by several by all of the child projects. And those um, many of the pesticides on this list were reported to cause concerns or restrictions based on the active ingredients contribution to the total applied toxicity in Asia, Africa, and South America. There are several priority active ingredients, including bifenthrin, carbofuran, carbosulfan, glufosinate, lambda-cyhalothrin, mancozeb, paraquat, and profenofos. All those were prioritized in several of the child projects, and dealing with them is currently ongoing. Next slide, please. Now, as part of our study, when analyzing um, the current status of policies and regulations, there are several resources that allow us to do so, but we mainly focus on whether countries adhere to certain multilateral environmental agreements, what is the status of the regulations on pesticide registration and re-registration. Are there certain legislations that relate to biopesticides and the registration of biopesticides? Does a given country have policies that promote research or access or use of non-chemical pest management options? Do countries offer subsidies, whether in direct or indirect forms? And yeah, thankfully, there are many publicly available resources that researchers can refer to, such as FOWLEX databases, in-country policies and regulations, and other strategies that are set at national, regional, or international levels. Next slide, please. So I'm now going to go through quickly. When we're talking about multilateral environmental agreements, we want to see if the country is party or adheres to the major ones, let's say the Montreal Protocol, Rotterdam Convention, Stockholm Convention, the Basel Convention, and the International Labour Organization's conventions, specifically one that relates to safety and health in agriculture, which is Convention C184. Next slide, please. When looking at regulations on pesticide registration, we want to see if a given country has legislation that establishes a mandatory registration system for pesticides that is tailored to the national needs, if it identifies the body that is responsible, that handles the registrations, and if there's a mechanism in place for wider regional coordination with the aim of harmonizing the registration of pesticides with neighboring countries. Next slide, please. Um, when it comes to biopesticides, it's very relevant to understand whether there is distinct registration pathways for biopesticides or biological control agents that is different from that of synthetic pesticides. If the data requirements include all the necessary identifiers of a given biological control agent, such as its identity, ecology, safety assessment, effects on human health and the environment, as well as efficacy. Um, Oftentimes, it's biopesticides are not defined in certain countries. So when evaluating, it's important to take note whether the regulation provides for a definition of what a biopesticide is, and also whether fewer data requirements or an accelerated process or lower fees are put in place for the registration of lower risk alternatives to HHPs and synthetic pesticides in general. Next slide, please. Now, it's also very relevant to look at whether certain policies are in place that encourage and promote research on alternatives. And we'll hear a talk today by our colleague from India on this, whether there are certain policies that encourage research uh, on alternatives to existing pesticides that pose fewer risks. Next slide, please. Um, I think last but not least, it's also important to evaluate whether there are certain legal frameworks for subsidy schemes, and those can have a direct form, such as tax exemptions or indirect forms of subsidies, such as lower fees for the registration of biopesticides, for example, or the use of biopesticides. Next slide, please. Perfect. So now, if I may encourage you to scan this QR code if you have your phone camera at hand. If not, I will post the participation link and the participation code to take part in this poll. Here, we'd like to understand more about your national context in the countries that you're based in or that you represent. I'll give you a minute before we move on with the question. I already see results coming in, so perhaps, Melanie, we could move to the next slide, please. Perfect. So the question was, what are the biggest barriers to phasing out HHPs in your countries? Each participant is allowed to make two choices out of the current available options. If none fit, the biggest barriers in your country, please tick other and provide an explanation in the box, in the comment box. We'd be happy to take on this conversation on other barriers to phasing out HHPs as part of the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So far, we see most responses mention limited enforcement capacity. Perhaps in second place comes the lack of viable alternatives. That's always a challenge. When there are certain HHPs that are registered in a given country, but no alternatives are either available or accessible, that poses massive challenges, of course. Um, Policies that support the transition away from HHPs are often very important and can drive this transition. When those policies are not in place, this definitely presents a big challenge. We see a lot of responses to limited political commitments, limited awareness and training, very few responses on the lack of dedicated biopesticide registration pathways. Our participants. Perhaps it's very fitting in your national context. Not always. A major barrier to phasing out HHPs is the lack of a dedicated biopesticide registration pathway. They're not necessarily um, strictly correlated. We have a few other responses. We'll get to those uh, at the end of the of the webinar if time allows. If not, we'll post the results of the poll with the responses when you join in the in the knowledge series and the farm knowledge series um, as part of the community. Now, that's all perfect and well. Thank you very much for your responses and for your attention. So without further ado, I'll pass the floor to my colleague Melanie Bateman, Global Lead of Synthetic Pesticides in CABI, who will walk us through the importance of developing and strengthening policies to identify and phase out HHPs and support lower risk alternatives. Thank you,
Okay,
Melanie.
everyone. Yeah, good to see you all. Yeah, it's very nice turnout and lots of feedback in the chat. That's really great. So yeah, I think you know, everyone who's come to this webinar has at least some level of interest in pesticide risk reduction, efforts to either phase out or manage highly hazardous pesticides and the like. And in many countries and regions, what we see is the development of strategies for supporting this transition to lower risk pest management. And yeah, one of the things that we've looked at is sort of what are some common elements across these strategies. And I'll quickly summarize those. And I think that this sort of strategy or roadmap development is a very helpful tool for identifying what are the pathways for sort of addressing the gaps in policies. So anyway, when we look across different regions and countries at their pesticide risk reduction or HHP strategies, there's in fact a priority focus on HHPs due to their disproportionate risks to human health and the environment. Likewise, there's a lot of alignment with the international frameworks and goals. The Code of Conduct, for instance, provides quite a toolkit with technical guidelines and even the registration toolkit. And then also through the Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions, we see that many regulators globally are looking to those conventions as one of the important information sources when they're considering things like registrations and also reviewing registrations. One thing that I think has been a lesson learned and emerges in many of these strategies is the importance of multi-sectoral coordination and stakeholder engagement across agriculture, health and environment sectors, and also engagement with the private sector, for example, the crop protection industry, but also the agricultural producers and suppliers and companies and the like. Also, civil society and these regional harmonization bodies are important partners that support efforts on HHP phase out. We see across many of the strategies that they apply a risk-based stepwise approach, where you have as a first step identifying the HHPs in use, assessing their associated risks, and also the needs that are driving their use and the availability of alternatives. And from there, you have the decision-making process and the implementation of mitigation or phase-out measures. Across the strategies, there's often a strong emphasis on promotion of lower-risk, sustainable pest management. In our previous poll that we just saw, this need for alternatives is one of the barriers. And so this is one of the areas where the cross-sectoral approach can help to address those gaps by bringing together research in the private sector and also getting farmers' inputs on what is a viable alternative and the like. Yeah, there's often in the strategies identified a need for strengthening the regulatory frameworks to improve upon the registration processes, and for example, to have periodic reviews of registered products built into kind of the system so that evolving risks are identified and assessed on an ongoing basis. Frequently, we've heard that and see this embedded in the strategies that capacity building is important. So even once you have kind of the alternatives identified, if it's something that farmers may not be familiar with, then it requires some capacity building generally. And also there's the need for public awareness raising and risk communication. In many countries, they flag enforcement and compliance mechanisms as a priority, and this includes tackling illegal imports, misuse, and weak compliance. Because often, even when maybe something is prohibited, it's still showing up on the marketplace due to things like porous borders. And then finally, for sort of having data-driven ongoing decision-making, monitoring and surveillance is a priority that shows up in many of these strategies. So anyway, that's a kind of a high-level overview of what we've seen from looking at different strategies and seeing what are some common elements. In our next presentation, we're going to have a more in-depth look, in particular, at Sri Lanka's strategic approach for pesticide risk reduction. So I am hoping that Dr. Jeevani Marasinghe, Registrar of the Pesticides of Sri Lanka, could now take the floor.
Hi.
Hi, thank you,
Melanie.
Dr.
Okay. Now, again, now my camera is not working, I think. I'm sorry. Hello?
That's okay. We hear you perfectly. So if you can just go ahead with your presentation. Thank you, Dr. Marasinghe.
Okay, thank you very much, and good day to all of you. So today I will be presenting Sri Lanka's pesticide risk reduction strategy. As you all know that so pesticides are play a vital role in protecting crops, but they are limited input to the community, like having human health and biodiversity and environmental hazards. So Sri Lanka has gained international recognition for successfully reducing pesticide-related deaths through evidence-based regulation. And building on these achievements, we have now developed a comprehensive medium-term strategy aimed at further reducing both acute and chronic health risks while promoting sustainable agricultural practices. In this presentation, I will briefly discuss where we are today, how we reached this point, and our vision for the future. So before discussing the risk reduction strategy, it is important to understand our regulatory framework. Pesticides in Sri Lanka are regulated under the Control of Pesticide Act number 33 of 1980, together with its subsequent amendments. The Office of the Registrar of Pesticides or the Registrar of Pesticides is the national authority responsible for pesticide registration, regulation, import control, and enforcement. Scientific guidance is provided by the Pesticide Technical and Advisory Committee, which consists of 10 ex officio members and 5 members appointed by the minister. This multidisciplinary committee ensures that regulatory decisions are based on sound scientific evidence, and enforcement is carried out by authorized officers located throughout the country who monitor compliance, inspect pesticide dealers, investigate offences, and take legal action where necessary. Together, these institutions provide the strong governance needed to implement effective pesticide risk reduction. So next slide, please. This slide provides a snapshot of pesticide use and current challenges in Sri Lanka. At present, there are 163 registered active ingredients of agropesticides marketed under approximately 700 commercial pesticide products. During 2025 alone, nearly 12,700 tons of agropesticides products were imported because we rarely manufacture them in Sri Lanka. Since the early 1980s, Sri Lanka has banned 55 pesticides because of unacceptable risks to human health or the environment, including all pesticides listed under the International Chemical Conventions. And despite these achievements, several challenges remain. Surveys show that only about 10% of farmers consistently use personal protective equipment, increasing the risk of occupational poisoning. In addition, pesticide residues continue to be detected in fruits and vegetables, emphasizing the need for better stewardship throughout the agriculture sector. Next slide, please. So, Sri Lanka's success did not result from a single intervention. Instead, it reflects more than 4 decades of evidence-based policymaking. The foundation was laid with the Control of Pesticides Act in 1980. By 1983, Sri Lanka had already begun banning the most hazardous pesticide responsible for acute poisoning. Between 1994 and 2020, additional restrictions were introduced based on poisoning surveillance data and scientific evidence. An important milestone came in 1997 when pesticide regulation became part of the National Suicide Prevention Policy, recognizing that restricting access to highly hazardous pesticides could save lives. Today, this journey continues through the medium-term pesticide risk reduction strategy, which aims for a 90% reduction in acute pesticide deaths by 2030 and ultimately 0 deaths by 2035. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. One of the most effective regulatory tools available is the restriction or banning of highly hazardous pesticides. Sri Lanka has progressively withdrawn pesticides that presented unacceptable risk to human health or the environment while ensuring that safer alternatives were available to farmers. Importantly, these decisions were never based solely on hazard. They were supported by scientific and medical data, poisoning surveillance, and consideration of agricultural needs as well. This balanced approach has allowed Sri Lanka to protect public health without compromising agricultural productivity. Next slide, please. So these slides show the impact of these policies. It was actually remarkable. It is estimated that pesticide regulation has saved approximately 93,000 lives over the past 2 decades. And during the same period, Sri Lanka experienced a 70% reduction in its national suicide rate as well. So more than 50 highly hazardous pesticides have been banned or restricted without measurable negative effects on agricultural production. These achievements were internationally recognized in 2021 when Sri Lanka received the Future Policy Award, often referred to as the Policy Oscar. This award demonstrates that pesticide regulation can simultaneously protect public health and support sustainable agriculture. Next slide, please. Thank you. I think I have, yes, I have described this. Okay, thank you very much. But despite this progress, there are still important challenges remain. So each year, approximately 450 to 500 people still die from pesticide suicide, making it one of the leading causes of suicides in Sri Lanka. A small number of older pesticides continue to account for most poisoning deaths, that is only 2 or 3 pesticides, namely profenophos and carbosulfan. And occupational exposure also remain a concern with low use of personal protective equipment among farmers. And at the same time, pesticide residues in agricultural produce threaten export markets, while the long-term health effects of chronic exposure require further research. And most of all, inflow of illegal pesticide is a significant issue in Sri Lanka now. And these remaining challenges highlight why continued action is essential. Okay, next slide, please. So in response to these challenges, Sri Lanka has developed its medium-term national pesticide risk reduction strategy for 2025 to 2030. The overall goal is to reduce both acute and chronic health impacts associated with pesticide exposure. The strategy aims to phase out or restrict the use of all highly hazardous pesticides that meet FAO and WHO criteria while promoting safe and more sustainable alternatives. It also aligns with Sri Lanka's national policies and international commitments, including the Sustainable Development Goals and Global Chemical Management Framework as well. Our long-term vision is ambitious but achievable: zero acute pesticide deaths by 2035. Next slide, please. Okay, this strategy is built around 6 interconnected pillars. First, strengthening pesticide regulation by phasing out the most harmful pesticides. Now we have a plan about this profenophos and carbosulfan. And second, promoting safe alternatives, including integrated pest management and other sustainable approaches like good agricultural practices, biopesticides. And the third is improving healthcare readiness through better poisoning management and expanded mental health services by collaborating with the health sector. And fourth, strengthening capacity through training, enforcement, and improved border control. This is also a collaborative effort with the Navy and the police in Sri Lanka. And fifth, enhancing monitoring by improving laboratory facilities and surveillance systems. And finally, strengthening international collaboration and sharing Sri Lanka's experience with other countries. Together, these pillars provide a comprehensive roadmap for achieving our national targets. Next slide, please. These objectives translate the strategy into a practical action. Our priorities include phasing out highly hazardous pesticides, promoting safe alternatives, strengthening enforcement against illegal trade, improving medical and laboratory capacities, and increasing public awareness. Then special attention will be given to pesticides such as carbosulfan and profenophos, which are responsible for the majority of recent poisoning deaths. Progress will be monitored through strong surveillance and regular evaluation to ensure that the strategy remains effective. Next slide, please. In conclusion, Sri Lanka has demonstrated that evidence-based pesticide regulation can save lives without compromising agricultural productivity. However, our work is not yet complete. Through strong regulation, scientific decision-making, stakeholder collaboration, and international partnerships, we believe it is possible to eliminate preventable pesticide deaths while supporting sustainable agriculture. Our vision is Sri Lanka, where pesticides no longer threaten human health or the environment, but are managed responsibly within a safe and sustainable agricultural system. So these are the strategic actions. We propose regulatory reforms, alternative promotion, capacity building, awareness and engagement, monitoring and evaluation. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So this is the future we want Sri Lanka free from acute pesticide-related deaths and with negligible long-term adverse impacts of pesticides, where sustainable agricultural practices protect human health, conserve biodiversity, and enhance food security and the agricultural economy. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jeevani. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sheila Willis, Head of International Programs at PAN UK, who will talk about the importance of establishing dedicated biopesticide registration pathways. The floor is yours, Sheila.
Thanks so much, and thanks for that previous really positive and interesting presentation from Dr. Marasinghe. So I'm going to just give a brief introduction to another topic. Sorry, back one slide. Which is concerned with the establishment of a dedicated biopesticide registration pathway. So next slide, please. So the challenge here is that biopesticides and biological control agents tend to pose lower risks to human health and the environment compared to synthetic pesticides. But often regulatory frameworks don't recognise that. They're designed for synthetic pesticides, and that puts an unnecessary regulatory burden on the registration of these potentially safer alternatives. And that has unfortunate consequences, such as long approval timelines, additional costs, and these products can be slower then to reach market, which denies farmers the opportunity to have access to a range of potentially much safer alternatives. So this paradox is that products that are inherently lower risk are facing high regulatory barriers to reach the market. Next slide, please. So there's an opportunity to address some of the disproportionate regulatory burdens. For example, a lot of the data requirements for synthetic pesticides are not fit for purpose when looking at biopesticides. Long approval times, as I mentioned, and that those times can be cut and accelerate these safer products reaching market. I just wanted to quickly mention that there are some, the work here is building on established methodologies, such as, for example, the FAO Pesticide Registration Toolkit, which has a module on this topic, and there are also specific guidelines produced by the JMPM. So without further ado, that was just a sort of very brief introduction to this topic. I'm delighted to introduce you to Dr. Esaiah Tjele, who's Programme Officer for Crops in Botswana, but also has really relevant and important regional expertise from his role in the Secretariat of SADC, the Southern African Development Community. So I'm very happy to introduce you to Esaiah. Over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure for having me here as the Secretariat. You can go to the next slide. Then the next one. Just by way of introduction, the SADC Secretariat is based in Botswana, is the headquarters, that's the building. For those of you who have been in Botswana, I think probably you have seen that building towards the CBD. The map of the countries that are members of the Southern African Development Community, we have 16 member states. From down South Africa up to DRC, Tanzania, Angola. So all those are the members, with 4 member states that are in the islands: Madagascar, Mauritius, Seychelles, and Comoros. The next slide, please. Just to give you a background in terms of the region, we are a more of an agro-based region, with agriculture having about 60 to 70% of the population engaged or benefiting directly or indirectly from the sector. The productivity is basically slow, and a number of reasons, as you can see: low application of fertilizers, irrigation, pests, and for any opportunity that farmers have to improve the productivity, like the use of pesticides, they will do it. And sometimes we have experienced challenges with the use of pesticides. The next slide, please. As much as we acknowledge that pesticides are part and parcel of the farming as a component of integrated pest management, but relatively the use of pesticides in the region is very slow, as the case with other inputs. But we have realized that as much as that is the case, the use of the highly hazardous pesticides is very common, maybe due to low enforcement. Sometimes you have member states that don't have regulatory frameworks in place, no policies. And in some cases where they are available, some of them are a bit outdated, not in alignment with some of the recent dynamics, global dynamics in the management of pesticides. And awareness, inadequate knowledge in the whole value chain, either from the policy level, the private sector, the farmers themselves, the majority still need to be capacitated. This is basically made worse by lack of coordination by all those that are involved in the value chains, from the sales, users, production. And in most cases, you would find that most of our member states are members of this multilateral environmental mayors, either the Food Safety, the Codex Alimentarius Commission, but in some cases, the implementation of those standards and those agreements as a result of poor enforcement it's very negligible. Hence, in most cases, you find that some of our member states are really struggling to live up to the expectation with the management of the pesticides. Though there are some exceptions and countries that are doing well, and luckily I've seen that there are some of the member states that are represented here in this webinar. Thank you. And the next slide, please. It's gone back. Okay. Currently, as a region, for the issue of the management of pests, we have the regional strategy on plant health that was approved in 2019, with much focus on the improving the productivity by outlining the correct and appropriate control interventions, but also considering the aspects of market access compliance. And that is also accompanied by the regional guidelines for pesticides management and risk reduction. The guidelines were meant to ensure that the substandard pesticides don't have entry into the region, hence a harmonized way of registration, testing. But with time, when we realized with the effects of climate change, recurring incidences of pest outbreaks, I think for the past 5 to 10 years, we have experienced frequent outbreaks of migrant pests, locust, fall armyworm, and as a result, the use of pesticides was increasing. So we had to find ways to manage that use, and then we realized some of the farmers were using highly hazardous pesticides. So we developed a strategy to find ways to phase out the use of these HHPs. And then I think during the outbreak also, we had to find ways to find safer alternatives, hence the region embarked on the development of guidelines for the registration of the biopesticides products. And this was also driven by the result that in most cases would find the outbreaks in environmentally sensitive areas like wetlands, swamps, near the rivers. And in such cases, it was very difficult to apply, but the damage was very significant. And you'd find that in some cases, the locusts during the day, they would fly to the fields. Maybe somehow in the evening, they just go back to the swamps where you cannot control them. So this was the case that basically encouraged the development of those instruments. The next slide, please. As I've highlighted, the outbreaks and also need for safer alternatives to protect human lives and also to facilitate improved regulatory frameworks management on pesticides through harmonized data requirements, evaluations, and then also making sure that we move in a harmonized approach as a region so that in our efforts to promote regional integration, but we also bring all these aspects of human life, environmental integrity, in alignment with other policy instruments at regional level. And all this were done through a very extensive consultative process. And I'm glad to say that with time, we also worked together with a number of partners, CABI being one of them, FAO and others, to also build capacity to facilitate smooth implementation of these instruments. The next slide, please. In terms of monitoring the implementation of these instruments at regional level, we have plant health experts. We call it the SADC Plant Protection Technical Committee, which basically was established in 1992, I think, along when the regional block was established. And we also have the SADC SPS committee, which is made up of both animal, plant health, and food safety people. And then we have a team that is basically meant to provide the guidance on pesticides specifically. So all these are the technical structures. And at policy level, we have senior officials. These are the permanent secretaries. And then you have sectoral ministers, which basically are the minister responsible for agriculture, which often meet at least once a year to monitor the progress and then provide policy guidance in terms of where we are, with the understanding that as much as this is the desire to move in that common approach, countries being at different level of development capacity, we often bring issues of capacity building together with the partners. Hence, I would request that maybe the partners that are here and willing to work with us, it would be good to join the hands so that we address this in a more coherent manner. The next slide, please. As a region, there are challenges. I think at national level, the issues of policies and the laws governing, we are still having some gaps that needs to be rectified to facilitate ease of domestication and implementation. The role of private sector, it's still minimal, hence we need to strengthen that coordination so that we foster that element of ensuring that substandard pesticides and those that need to be phased out, we work easily. I think the previous speakers talks about the porosity of our borders, and sometimes with the understanding that the private sector, sometimes they're only interested in making profit, but I think it's high time that we work together so that they also understand the impact of the products that they work with. We have also worked with CABI on trying to do the crop grouping in alignment with the codex crop grouping, but we also have some challenges of skills. I think it has been emphasized that enforcement is a result of a number of factors, though awareness, the enabling environment, and also the infrastructure for also conducting all these tests, I think it's also one of the hampering elements that basically affects the smooth management of and sustainable management of the pesticides. The next slide, please. So as a region, as we move towards regional integration, where we want to see movement of goods and services moving between member states, but I think there should be caution that has to be made, that we are well organized as a region, having harmonized regulatory frameworks, policies with well understood standards, and we have well-structured institutions that basically take these mandates with well-capacitated individuals, and then effective coordination where everybody understands their role. I think that's one of the key areas, but also elements of accountability for all those that are even given responsibilities to make sure that where there are gaps, timely interventions are implemented to correct, but also outside the region, we need to strengthen the working relationship with all the organizations that are involved so that we spread that in a more harmonized way, because at the end of the day, the world has become a global village, hence the need for us to work together. The next slide. In conclusion, I think we all agree that pesticides are part and parcel of the agricultural sector and the health sector. As we have noted that even some of the banned pesticides are still used in the health sector. And with issues of climate change, basically signal the need for us to work with other sectors, because we have frequent pest outbreaks that require regular, sometimes when they happen because of our poor biosecurity capacities, such as lack of inadequate surveillance and monitoring. By the time we realize the outbreaks, it's already late, hence more reliance on the use of pesticides. Although we have some existing initiatives, I think the issues of silos basically doesn't bring much help. Hence, it's one of those areas that we need to strengthen. And as a region, we are trying to move towards a One Health platform. I think a lot of strides have been made in the region, and there is a roadmap for that, and it was approved recently by a minister, so that all those, whether you are in animal health, plant health, food safety, human health, environmental health, so we try to work together to ensure that coordination is strengthened. But all this would also need capacity and resources, hence why the call for all the partners out there, let's work together and then strengthen this area so that we don't work in isolation, so that at the end of the day, we want to see the impact. I think probably this is the last slide, the next one. So thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Esaiah, for this uplifting and positive presentation. Thank you for sharing with us and with the viewers SADC's strides that it's making towards the goal of establishing guidelines and regulations to manage pesticides and highly hazardous pesticides and make low-risk alternatives more available. Thank you very much for that. I want to thank all the participants for their active participation in the Q&A box. The team is attempting to address those questions that have been typed in the Q&A box. I encourage you all to stay on after the last presentation for a Q&A session, where some of the questions which you've addressed for specific speakers, we'll give the chance to those speakers to answer them, and we'll open the floor for more and more questions to come. And now, please allow me to introduce Dr. Alex Stuart. He's an international project manager at PAN UK, who will give us a brief overview on subsidies, tax breaks, and investment in extension and research for non-chemical control. The floor is yours, Alex.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Next slide, please. So yeah, the third key opportunity for governments to support the phase out of HHPs that we would like to highlight includes the implementation of subsidies, tax breaks, and investment in extension and research for non-chemical control. So what do we mean by subsidies? So there's no universally accepted definition of a subsidy, but the OECD definition that we've gone for is that a subsidy is a result of government action that confers an advantage on consumers or producers in order to supplement their income or lower their costs. Subsidies, that's a key tool for government intervention. In particular, subsidies can support the transition away from HHPs by encouraging farmers to adopt new technologies such as non-chemical pest management inputs through a governance mechanism that compensates farmers for adoption costs and reduces their perception of technological risks, which is especially important during a transition process. Next slide, please. So relevant examples of subsidies and investment that we came across during our review project is that can support the transition away from HHPs include direct subsidies or tax exemptions that lower the cost of non-chemical inputs, direct payments to farmers for uptake of non-chemical pest management practices, subsidies that reduce the fees for farmers to sell produce under organic certification schemes, registration fee waivers for biopesticides or biological control agents that can improve availability for farmers, investment in research and innovation and extension agent training in non-chemical control methods, investment in extension to promote non-chemical control methods such as via farmer training and demonstration plots, investment in local bio-input production capacities, and low interest or collateral-free bank loans for organic or HHP-free production practices. Next slide, please. So on that, I'd now like to provide I'd like to introduce Dr. Gagnesh Sharma, who's Director of the National Centre for Organic and Natural Farming of India, to provide a highly insightful overview of subsidies and government support being implemented in India to support the phase out of hazardous chemicals. Dr. Sharma, over to you. Hopefully, Dr. Sharma is in the room.
Dr. Sharma, can you hear us? We see you're in the room, but you're probably muted. Thank you all for your patience while we try to understand the technical difficulties that Dr. Sharma is facing and addressing them as soon as possible. Yeah. So in waiting for Dr. Sharma, perhaps we could take a couple of questions that have come in the Q&A. Okay, we have a question which I believe was addressed to Dr. Jeevani. So there's a question on the fact that kidney failure is currently very rampant in some pesticide intensive use areas, and people were wondering whether there are any government initiatives that are currently aiming to protect the victims and stop using the suspected pesticides.
Well, thank you very much for this question. To identify the causes of this kidney disease, different researchers work in that areas, but anyway, none of them have proved that it is from pesticide use. So there are some different opinions with regard to this CKDU. This is caused by contaminated water, but it is not pesticides, but heavy metals sometimes, and the hardiness of water. Those are the decisions so far we obtained. So still I think researchers are working on that. So the medical sector, they actually help people to get through that by collaborating with the government to provide them pure water to those areas. So that is the approach by the government and the health sector in Sri Lanka so far.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Jeevani.
Okay.
Perhaps another question that we can take to our panelists, Dr. Jeevani or Dr. Esaiah, please feel free to jump in. So we have a question that came in on policy and strategy, and the participant was specifically asking how can veterinary public health regulators and animal feed quality control authorities integrate pesticide reduction strategies? Is that something that Dr. Esaiah, you have dealt with as part of the SADC Secretariat?
Yes, thank you, Doc. For us, in order to make sure that we work in a more coordinated, we have created that One Health platform for the region. And such a platform is considered as a statutory structure that would also report its progress to the ministers for policy guidance, and then for more policy strengthening if there are some gaps that are needed. So we also have the guidelines for registration of the veterinary drugs and medicines in the region. This was done in the context of food safety also. So we try as much as possible to try to bring everybody on board. I know it's a journey. It's not just something that you can do away with it once and then think you have addressed it. It's quite a journey. There's more that needs to be done, hence why the call for all partners, all key stakeholders to work in a more coordinated approach so that we address these things in a more holistic manner rather than working in silos, because the world is changing now and then. So what might be a challenge today, tomorrow might be something else. So we have to keep on moving and then try to push as a region. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Esaiah. I believe this is also, you touched on that briefly when you spoke about the One Health approach that SADC is currently adopting to deal with that. Thank you very much for this answer. There's an interesting question in the chat also on hybrid crop protection products. So those products that combine biologicals with reduced doses of conventional pesticides. So the question is, have those become scientifically acceptable as a pathway for reducing HHPs? And if so, what regulatory change needs to be done to facilitate the registration of these hybrid products? Dr. Jeevani, as a registrar, this might be close to your area. Do you have any thoughts on the use of hybrid products and the ways to register them in Sri Lanka?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yes,
could you
I'm
please
there.
repeat the question,
Yeah.
please?
Yes, I'll repeat it. Welcome, Dr. Sharma. Just allow us to take this question and then we'll move to
Thank you.
your presentation. Thank you.
Sorry for being late. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Dr. Jeevani, the question was on whether hybrid crop protection products, so those that combine biopesticides with lower doses of synthetic pesticides, are an acceptable pathway to reducing HHPs. And if so, are there any regulatory change that needs to be done to accommodate such products?
You mean the combinations of biopesticides and synthetic?
Yes, as part of one single product, yes.
Sorry, we do not have any registered in Sri Lanka.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sharma, welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. And we'll now give you the floor to talk to us about enabling environment for reducing HHP use. You'll hopefully touch on policies, incentives, and institutional support with practical examples from India that would help all participants today in understanding better this topic. The floor is yours, Dr. Sharma.
Okay, thank you. So can you shift to the next slide? Good afternoon, good evening to all. Good evening, Robert, and all the team of CABI and other scientists and experts who have joined here. Good evening to all of you. Yeah, I'm working as a director in National Center for Organic and Natural Farming. It's under Ministry of Agriculture, and we are looking after how to promote organic natural farming, and also the topic which has been assigned to me today, that is how to reduce the usage of over usage of pesticides and all, how to control these things. And I'm going to summarize the ecosystem, the policy, the regulatory, and the promotional aspects which are going on in our country for taking care of this aspect. So as you all know that pesticides are regulated by most of the countries. So similarly in our country also, as per Insecticide Act 1968, this has been framed and it has been administered by Department of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare under Ministry of Agriculture. So this act regulates the import, manufacture, sale, transport, distribution, and use of insecticides to prevent risk to human beings or animals and for matters connected therewith. For effective implementation of the provisions of Insecticides Act, the Department of Agriculture and Farmer Welfare, they have set up an attached office, the Directorate of Plant Protection, Quarantine and Storage, which administers various statutory functions under the Insecticide Act 1968. So this include the registration of insecticides, inclusion of chemical insecticides in the schedule to the Act, notification of insecticide inspectors, and amendments in insecticides rules. Next slide. So this is a kind of overview on how these regulations are going on in our country as far as pesticides is concerned. So there are always registration committees, and action are to be taken up by these registration committees. So as you all know that pesticides which are banned or severely restricted in other countries due to their toxic concerns, and they are reported to have posed some harm to human health or environment in our country or other countries. These are reviewed by the registration committees. These reviews are undertaken by obviously the registration committee, which is being which has already been constituted by the the Department of Plant Protection and Quarantine under Ministry of Agriculture, based on the recommendations of such expert committees, and after due consultation with the registration committee, the ministry so far banned or phased out 46 pesticides and 4 pesticide formulations for import, 4 manufacture or use in the country. In addition, 8 pesticide registrations have been withdrawn and 9 pesticides have been placed under restricted use. So this is the action taken up by this is just to summarize, just to know that how this ecosystem works in our country. Next slide. Yes. We all know the hazardous effects of the conventional insecticide and pesticides for agriculture produce, fields, farmers, and also the environment, including all animal, human beings, and other birds, and even microbes also. So conventional insecticide and pesticides, these are synthetic chemical pesticides, and they leave definitely a certain amount of residue because of because non-degradation and all. So therefore, its application dosage is fixed by keeping some amount of residue in the soil after application to reduce to negligible amount of residue is left in the soil after application. So this is a concern also all the time. So indiscriminate and excess use of conventional pesticides can contaminate soil, water. Everybody knows this. I don't want to repeat it. So the registration committee constituted under Section 5 of the Insecticides Act 1968 in our country registers the pesticide for use in the country after evaluation of their safety and efficacy. So this is very important. This is R&D aspect also. So registration committee, while registering the pesticides, provides the details of doses, crops, precautionary measures, antidotes, etc. on labels and leaflets. The registered pesticides, if used as per label and leaflets, do not pose any harm to human beings, animals, and living organisms other than pests. However, the adverse impact of pesticides on farmers' health or environment, it may arise sometimes if the pesticides are not used with adequate safety precautions as given in the label and leaflet approved under the Insecticide Act and rules thereof. Next slide. Now, what are the alternate? What promotional aspects are being taken up? What are the alternate to these? Reducing the usage of these insecticides, pesticides, which are synthetic based. So the main concern is now the main thing which Government of India is promoting is now biopesticides. So it is being promoted for the last so many years, and now also a lot of big industries, companies have been set up, and they are doing very good by manufacturing the formulations of biopesticides. These pesticides are derived from things in nature, we all know, that can be used to control pests. This includes substances derived from plants, minerals, and microorganisms. So this is the definition under the Act also for biopesticides. Neem-based, you all know, the Azadirachta indica is plenty in our country. And this neem-based pesticides are the pest control agents manufactured from neem extracts. So these are used in agriculture for pest disease management and to supply nutrients to plants also. And neem is safe for farmers and can be used during the entire crop cycle, environmentally safe and compatible with the integrated pest management strategies. So these biopesticides are one of the important, component under the integrated pest management strategies. And obviously, neem is also safe to non-target organism and beneficial to insects such as honeybees and silkworms, which are really a matter of concern nowadays to the entire, our earth also. Both organic and neem-based pesticides do not leave any synthetic residue in the crop, produce, and soil, whereas synthetic chemical pesticides leave a certain amount of pesticide residue after application. Under Insecticide Act, there is no usage of the term organic pesticides. However, the term biopesticides may be used to refer to products containing biocontrol agents, initially natural entities or chemical produced from natural materials such as animals, plants, bacteria, or specific minerals. So biopesticides may include natural plant-derived products, which may include alkaloids, terpenoids, phenolics, and other secondary chemicals. Next slide. So this is a little bit basics about these biopesticides. And obviously, this I am continuing that alternate to pesticides, that is neem-based, already discussed. This, biopesticides and neem-based pesticides are better than the conventional chemical pesticides. This research and review articles all over world, you can see in the journals published. These are usually inherently less toxic than conventional pesticides. And they generally affect only the target pest and closely related organisms, in contrast to broad spectrum conventional pesticides that may affect organisms as different as birds, insects, and mammals. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. Another aspect is of industry. The pesticide industry in India has a size of near to 50,000 crore, and generic pesticides are in demand worldwide. There is tremendous potential in the pesticide industry which needs to be tapped. The registration committee, however, they regret to note that consumption of the pesticide in the country is less as of now in our country. The survey shows that it is 0.5 kg per hectare, whereas the consumption in some other countries is as high as 17 kg per hectare, even though India is the second largest producer of agricultural products. Next slide. So this is very important, a key point. So initiatives for alternate use in India. Pesticides are inherently hazardous, and highly hazardous pesticides cause disproportionate harm to environment and human health with acute and chronic toxicity. One of the company, HIL India Limited, along with Unido, is currently taking up the project promoting eco-friendly crop production solution for persistent organic pollutant and highly hazardous pesticide reduction in Asia. So this is one of the thing which I come to know from the our Google search under a program named Financing Agrochemicals Reduction and Management Farm Program of the Global Environment Facility, GEF, with the objectives to minimize the use of highly hazardous pesticide and persistent organic pollutants in agriculture, to catalyze investment in the agriculture sector, etc. So this is one of the unique project just completed recently also, I think. Next slide. Financial support and incentives. Department of Chemicals and Petrochemicals is also one of the agency which extends financial support under Chemical Promotion Development Scheme in our country for organizing seminars, conferences, and trainings to create awareness among the farmers about judicious use of agrochemicals and fertilizers. And this not only this, but the adverse IPFT, one of the institute, they are also organizing. This is the Institute of Pesticide Formulation Technology in our country. They also organize training programs under this Chemical Promotion Development Scheme to enhance awareness. And it also helps in addressing the problems such as soil degradation, damage to the underground water bodies, human life and environment due to the adverse effect of residual pesticides. So this IPFT conducts such kind of studies and surveys also, and also promotional programs. Farmers are also being sensitized through video clips and PPE kits distribution also given to the farmers, taking this into the fact that the increased use of chemical fertilizer in the country would consequently translate into enhanced crop production. The committee, it feels that the training to the farmer is the need of the hour to educate them about the judicious use of fertilizers to reduce their harmful effects on the environment and other forms of life. Therefore, the recommendation is that Pan-India training programs should be organized at frequent intervals of time with wide publicity so as to engage more and more farmers for understanding the judicious use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides along with the organic fertilizers and biopesticides. Next slide. Now, some of the key policy interventions just generalized here. I'm not naming the schemes, but our Ministry of Agriculture is organizing so many big programs for promoting the regenerative agriculture in the form of National Mission for Natural Farming, Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana. These are the names you will find in Google also in ministry website. So the motto is to encourage farming techniques that enhance soil health, such as crop rotation, cover cropping, reduced tillage, and organic farming. And organic farming, as you all know, that the results, the data shows that when we start converting towards organic farming, definitely our insecticide and pesticide usage reduces in the form of biopesticides and other cultural practices. Even the incidence of insect pests and disease is quite less noticed. Funding for soil microbiome research, allocation of resources for studying soil microbiomes, their role in ecosystem and their impact on human and animal health. Indian Council of Agriculture Research, ICAR, our main research body in the country, that is taking care of this all India coordinated projects, and lot of research is going on this aspect. Incorporation of soil health in environmental protection policies, implement land use and conservation policies that preserve natural habitats and prevent soil degradation. Then incentives for soil carbon sequestration practices, providing financial incentives for practices that increase carbon storage in soil, contributing to climate change mitigation. So these are some of the interventions which directly and indirectly shows that our government of India, our Ministry of Agriculture and other ministries, they are keen to reduce the excessive usage of chemicals and pesticides in one or the other way. Next slide. Integration of soil health into public health strategies, recognizing soil health's impact on food security and disease prevention in public health planning and policy. So this is also being taken care of. Development of soil health benchmarks, establishing and enforce soil health standards and benchmark for agriculture and land use practices. The soil health card initiation is a very big initiative in our country. Education and awareness programs that it's going on and at each and every level. Not only Ministry of Agriculture, but Ministry of Agriculture in coordination with the state governments and districts, the Krishi Vigyan Kendras, they are doing a lot of awareness, education and outreach programs through Directorate of Extensions, targeting farmers, the policymakers and the general public. Support for sustainable land management, encouraging sustainable land management practices that maintain or improve soil microbial biodiversity and functions. Collaboration and partnership between government, academia, industry, and communities to share knowledge and practices that support soil microbiome conservation. Lot of national, international seminars and workshops are being organized not only by the industry, academia, but also Ministry of Agriculture and our national center also organizes such programs. Regulatory measures against soil builder, regulate and reduce the use of harmful chemicals and pollutants that adversely affect soil microbiome. So this aspect is being taken care of. We have a fertilizer control order. We are framing the natural farming standards also. We have already framed the initial draft, and now it is being taken care of by the Food Safety Standard Authority of India as an act, Organic and Natural Farming Act. Next slide. So this is this slide I have taken from one of the presentations given by Ministry of Agriculture at certain forums. So this you can see that agricultural sustainability overall is dependent on soil quality. The cycle is clear, soil quality is good, then the water will be very clean. Crop yield will definitely affect if our water is clean and good, and environment definitely will be affected. And livestock, the most important part of our overall agriculture sustainability. So we in this country are promoting National Mission for Natural Farming, where the cattle, the main cow is the center point, and the integration of cow dung, cow urine based bioformulations, means based on farm prepared bioformulations are being prepared. So livestock is the key. So we are promoting mission natural farming in such a way that the cow is an essential component, the cattle are essential, very much essential, so that we can produce, the small and marginal farmers can produce the on-farm, this, formulations, kind of bio-inputs on-farm. It may be, insect pest disease control, or it can be a nutrient management kind of a thing. So these are being promoted in our country. So overall aim is to improve the water productivity, pest surveillance, forewarning and management under this National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture, soil health and nutrient management by one or the other way through different schemes, adoption of organic and natural farming, and building the capacity of the farmers is the key concern on all these aspects. So Government of India is training master trainers, the para extension workers at local level to teach farmers how to convert towards organic and natural farming, how to take up regenerative farming, how to take up energy management and farm mechanization, low tillage, minimum tillage, we can say, agri waste management, including cattle, cow dung, and agro waste, so that it can be converted to good compost, vermicompost, or another kind of, we can say, pesticides, means biopesticides based formulations also. So insurance and risk management under this National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture, Government of India is having a dedicated scheme, strengthening value chains like forming local groups in clusters, because in our country 80% of the farmers are small and marginal, so they are being collectivized, mobilized to form small clusters. After the clusters are successful, they are strengthened to form a big farmer producer organization, a big federation, and then the entire value chain is being promoted to have its own processing unit, packaging, labeling, and then branding for this chemical free produce. So crop diversification, definitely our National Mission for Natural Farming, one of the important component is multi-cropping, crop diversification, integrated farming systems, including agroforestry and bamboo. In fact, National Mission for Natural Farming is an integration of cattle. Basically, the main key point here is cow, and then the integration of trees and multiple crops, we can say. So organic and natural farming, both of these are being promoted in our country. Climate ready crops, varieties, and resilient practices are being taken care of. ICR is doing a lot of research. Ministry of Environment and Forest is also doing this green, project on carbon based, farming, enhancing resilience in livestock and fisheries. So this is also being taken care of by Department of Animal Husbandry and Dairy. So this is there from my side. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. I hope I have completed in time. Thank you.
Amazing, Dr. Sharma. Thank you very much for this very encouraging talk. It's really nice to see how India is addressing the problem in a very holistic manner, such as examples we've seen from the other guest speakers today. But thank you very much for highlighting all the various components that the government of India is tackling in order to achieve the broader goal of reducing pesticide risks and making alternatives more readily available and accessible and used throughout the country. I encourage all the participants to remain online so that we try to address some of the questions you have asked. Dr. Sharma, it struck me the question when you mentioned climate-ready crops as part of this as part of India's agricultural roadmap. Do you mind elaborating a little bit more on that?
Climate resilient crops.
Yeah.
Definitely. Our main research, engine in our country, that is Indian Council of Agriculture Research, the main research body, they have developed a lot of, climate resilient varieties also. They are into this, and it can be drought resistant. It can be, such kind of crop which is, which can withstand the effect of biotic and abiotic kind of a stress. So a lot of varieties have been developed in our country, and it is region specific, climate specific, and climate resilient, we can say overall. And these varieties are available at local level. And only thing is that when we go for organic and natural farming, then we say that our standards say that it should not be it should not be treated with any chemicals. So this is the thing for our organic and natural farming standards, we can say. So this is there.
Yep. Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma. There's an interesting question in the comments, which might be to any of our guest speakers, really. And the question is that in many low and middle income countries, there is sort of lack of a integrated surveillance system on the impact of HHPs on human health and the environment. Knowing the importance of this data, how can what could these lower middle income countries do to find a suitable way to transition to alternatives with this lack of surveillance data? How can policymakers know of the severity of a given situation if they don't have the data to support it?
Can you repeat it in short?
In short, when there is lack of data on the impact of
Because of the
HHPs,
lack of data. Okay.
yeah,
So how to take
what can be done to support policymakers to make the right decisions?
Okay. So data, definitely for taking a decision, we need the data. And data in our country, data is available for each and every aspect. And I don't know about other countries, but definitely there can be a baseline survey. They can initiate this data capturing exercise. It can be taken up at local level. The systems are set everywhere. I don't know in other parts of the world what other countries are doing as far as data capturing is concerned. But most of the developed countries, they are having a very good data, this thing, real-time data is being captured. And a lot of tools and techniques are there. So pilot basis, if somebody is interested in some country where they want to take up a data, then a pilot studies can be initiated for capturing the data at local level, identifying a strategic key point in certain areas, in certain smaller locations. So there it can be taken up and it can be scaled up, replicated next year for other areas also.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma. Dr. Jeevani and excuse me, Dr. Jeevani and Dr. Esaiah, may I ask you to please turn on your camera and join the panel in addressing some of the questions that are being raised? Oh, Dr. Jeevani, we know that you have some technical difficulties with the camera, so we're
Yes,
not gonna
I'm sorry.
hold you accountable to this. Thank you very much. We have a question on perhaps with a question that would help us define a bit more what lower risk alternatives mean. And that question is, currently it specifically relates to biodynamic agriculture, biodynamic farming. And the participant is asking whether, as a strategy, biodynamic agriculture can be included in policies to reduce pesticide risks and pesticide residues on food.
Well, some groups are practicing biodynamics in my country as well. For as alternatives, well, it is like this. For organic agriculture, the biodynamics are okay. However, when we need to export the commodities, sometimes some countries do not accept such kind of measures taken for pest control. But Actually, what we do in our country is we follow this WHO criteria, and we do not register the class 1 pesticides, and we do not promote class 2 pesticides. So we have mostly the class 3 and 4 pesticides, and also we follow this FAO WHO criteria for HHPs. So you know that 8 criteria, and also to some extent we gather data on the incidents caused under the conditions of use in Sri Lanka. For example, our farmers, most of them do not use the PPEs. So we survey and collect data, and also we collect hospital data. They have records about the hospital admissions, mobility data with related to incidents. So basically we use that criteria to limit the HHPs in Sri Lanka. So alternatives are mostly the class 3 and 4 pesticides.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. Jeevani.
Thank you.
I think this is an interesting question that now might have a bit of a broader answers, and really there might not be one correct answer. So we have a question on, okay, we know the importance of reducing HHPs, phasing them out, and eliminating their use, but they're currently in some national context being used because no safer or other effective alternatives are available. What can we do to address this obstacle, this challenge, which, by the way, was flagged as part of our poll as a major challenge? The lack of available alternatives is a major challenge. In your countries, in the panelists' countries, do you think there's a certain key that policymakers need to address, or should there be a holistic approach to all of this to address the various obstacles to making alternatives available?
May I come in?
Please go ahead.
Yes. I think there are a number of underlying factors, as you said, that probably we have to look at in a more broader sense. The first thing is, do we have data to show the impact of not taking that route? But also, as much as we desire to see a change, on the ground, the countries that we serve, what options do they have on the ground? These are some of the things that we have to see. Then also, looking at these underlying factors, the issue of input security normally makes our government go in all directions in terms of trying to be food secure. For instance, in a region where you have almost 17% of the population is regarded to be vulnerable and food insecure. So probably the conventional way, people will continue to use it. And then when you try to encourage other safe alternatives, they'll say, use pesticides to stop this pest. We are already low in terms of productivity, where you have our hectarage is about around 1.7 tons per hectare, which is very low when you compare it to other regions. I know there are countries that are doing well, like South Africa probably is an exception. Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, probably they're relatively doing well. But that's the average yield in the region. And that in itself tells you, in terms of bringing the change, there has to be a lot that has to be done. And with the understanding that implementation, as much as we are a regional bloc, is done at national level. Mm-hmm. And with countries having their own sovereignty, you really need to push, build capacity, follow up through the monitoring and evaluation methods that basically will bring everybody on board. And these are some of the things that we have to consider when we try to bring I know we have tried to encourage, but in most cases, you look on the ground in terms of the options and the choices that countries have. They still want to go the route of the conventional way. Basically, when you look at most of our countries, they provide subsidies. They're implementing subsidy programs, and one of the inputs that they provide, apart from the seeds, is the pesticides. And when you try to find out who determines which pesticides do we buy, so sometimes you only realize that sometimes it was the minister who went to a certain country and then he just came with that that load of pesticides, and then the scientists were not involved. So in that way, it becomes very difficult. Hence, we have to continue to educate, but also, as I've mentioned earlier, that the need for us as sectors to say, if you produce this way, but you may not be able to trade beyond your country, but also the issues of food concerns, maybe the health also has to provide data to say there are these incidences where we have realized the issues of food safety, and then also compliance outside, but also in terms of research to say, even if you use pesticides heavily, but do you make much difference in terms of the yields? All those things have to come to play so that we comprehensively say at the end of the day, but this is the route that we have to agree collectively and say we have to take this route. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Esaiah. If I may just follow up with a very small question here, and then I'll give my floor to my colleague Sheila.
Yes.
When you spoke about the incentives for certain pesticide and pesticides or the use of certain active ingredients, do you feel that currently in your development community or in other communities across Africa, is there a move to incentivize the use of biopesticides and remove those subsidies that are currently being given to synthetic pesticides?
Currently, there isn't much incentives. I think the only tool that we have to mostly rely on is awareness and education.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as the trade, to a certain extent, can influence the level of use, mm-hmm. in terms of saying, for compliance sake, let's reduce this. It hasn't changed much in terms of the commodities. But I think that's one avenue that we can explore more on it, to say if we really try to commercialize our agriculture. But also there are a number of factors. When you look at the majority of farmers, which is mostly smallholder farmers, producing at a small scale, with an average of about 1 to 2 hectares, most of the farmers. So the commercialization is not that much. I think our governments have to develop programs where we try to incentivize, as you have mentioned, try to make them aware that that the production can just be beyond only food security, but also can also enhance other ways of livelihoods, can generate income. But in this process, there are certain standards that you have to meet, and it has to start somewhere where everybody has to play their part. So even the outlets where we get this pesticide, sometimes you would be shocked in most of our countries, in the streets where you find, in the open market, you find an HHP sold. There was one incident for lack of knowledge with chemicals. Somebody was selling in the street, and then he sold the farmer as a pesticide to control the stalk borer. But that was the herbicide, not the pesticide.
Yeah.
So sometimes people don't understand. So as long as it's a pesticide you buy, you don't know whether it's used, because even pesticides, the herbicides also, there are those which you can use before the emergence of a crop. There are those that you can use after the emergence of the crop. So the crops were banned. I visited the field, all the crops were banned because they were. So such knowledge is very critical to help us to move in the right direction. So hopefully
Absolutely.
I have tried to answer. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Esaiah. Sheila, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. That was so interesting to hear from Esaiah, and really chimes with our experience. We do a lot of work in West Africa, in Benin in particular, with smallholder farmers, and also in Ethiopia. And those experiences are very familiar. But I also, on the cost question, I think that's a really interesting and important one that's just come up. In the situation in Benin, for example, we're seeing that the dependence on heavy use of HHPs is causing real economic harm, not only in terms of food safety, as we've heard, but also and in direct impact on farmers' health, but also on soil degradation. They've been measuring quite substantial impacts on GDP across the country, attributable to soil degradation, and the underlying reasons that it's thought that's happening is largely about intensive use of pesticides on cotton in this case. So that's another issue. And the transition to more kind of sustainable approaches has improved soil health, resilience, and also crop diversification. So if you're thinking about food security as well, which is also key in that kind of context, there are big advantages there. But you mentioned also, I wanted to pay tribute to Sri Lanka's experience, and Dr. Marasinghe was talking about data collection. In Sri Lanka, they've done a tremendous job to increase the amount of data available to them to take these kind of decisions. And I just wanted to pay tribute to that, because I know a lot of countries have very gappy data. We know from research that farmers tend not to report health incidents related to pesticide use to medical services. There's massive underreporting. Even when they do, medical services are often not set up to use that data or to feed it in a way that regulators can use. So we've worked in more than 13 countries now to support national authorities to collect that data, and it's had various effects. It helps to prioritize and identify highly hazardous pesticides that are causing widespread human health harms. But it also helps to understand what the exposure routes and the sort of behavioral issues underlying that, whether it's an understanding of what alternatives are, or maybe it's other hazardous practices that farmers are undertaking. In India, for example, we did a survey, and we found that there were clusters of high levels of acute poisoning in areas where farmers were making cocktails of hazardous pesticides. They were sort of chucking several products into their pesticide tanks at the same time, and that was associated with high levels of poisoning. And then we could really focus on that aspect of what was causing harm. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks, Robert, for giving me the opportunity.
No, thank you very much, Sheila, for shedding light on those experiences and on those lessons learned from all the various representatives of countries and organizations who joined us today. I want to thank all the participants who joined. If I may ask Melanie to share the last slide of her screen, please. I was very happy to see that throughout the webinar we had attendance of over 250. I think I saw at one point, even more maybe, participants, and even until now, 2 hours later, we still have around 180 participants online. I thank you very, very much for your patience, for your curiosity and willingness to learn about these topics that we've dealt with today. I want to offer a big thank you to our panelists, our guest speakers, Dr. Esaiah, Dr. Jeevani, and Dr. Sharma. Thank you very much for joining us today and for sharing your experiences and representing your countries on these very timely and important topics that the farm program, CABI, PAN UK, and many other organizations are trying to address. Unfortunately, now that the time is up, we won't be able to answer all your questions. But please, to access the slide and the recording, follow the website that you see on the screen, geffarm.org. And please join the Ask the Experts group where speakers will be able to answer you to address any unanswered questions. Last but not least, I would like to extend a huge thank you to Nadia and the GGKP and farm teams who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make this a very successful webinar. Thank you very much, Nadia, Alison, Helena, Elena, Melis, and everyone. A big thanks again to Melanie, Alex, and Sheila, my colleagues who have made this possible. And thank you all for joining.
Thank you, colleagues, for joining the webinar. We have reached the end. Please don't miss updates and future sessions of Farm Knowledge Series, and hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thank you.